Hello everybody. So let's talk about one-point perspective. And the best way to do this is by seeing it first. I have set up this room with 3 cubes in one-point perspective, along with the background is all in one-point perspective. And to make this easier for us, I have color-coded the edges of my cubes here. Remember, a cube has 3 sets of parallel lines, and depending on how many of these are receding, will affect if we are seeing 1-point, 2-point, or 3-point perspective. I have made the width of the cubes green, the length of the cubes pink, and the height of the cubes blue. Oh, before we start talking about receding lines, first I want to play a little game. Can you find the horizon line in this room? And how many horizon lines are there? That's an easy one. There is one. That's right. There is always one horizon line and only one horizon line in your picture. So first, we need to remember what the horizon is. It is where the ground meets the sky, right? Well, that's not so helpful right now because in this situation, I cannot see the sky or the ground here. There are no windows, I can't see through walls, it's not there. So that's not very helpful in this situation. But we know it's still there somewhere. So what else do we know about the horizon? It is at our eye level. And that's my easy trick for finding the horizon line in any situation. Everything below the horizon line is below eye level. Everything above the horizon line is above eye level. So if we can find all the things above and below the horizon, you can eventually deduce where the horizon is. So everything below the horizon, we can see the tops of. This table, we can see the top of it here. All 3 of these cubes, we can see the top of them. So we know that the horizon is somewhere above these cubes. As long as we can still see the top of them, the horizon is above them. And you'll notice that the tops of these cubes are getting progressively smaller in height from here to here, then from here to here, and here to here, as we get higher up. And that is our clue here, our magic clue that we are getting closer to the horizon. That's diminution, right? The closer we get to the horizon, the smaller things appear. And we can barely see the top of this cube here. We can only see it just a little bit. So that means we are getting close to the horizon. It is somewhere here, is my guess. Now let's look for things above the horizon line. Now we know that if it's above the horizon, we are looking up at it. So you will see the bottom of things. Now this can be a little tricky here, especially because my shelves are so dark, but a bookshelf or stairs are really great tools for finding the horizon. Because a lot of these shelves here, I can see the bottom of these shelves. So we know that the horizon must be lower than these shelves here. This shelf here, you can just barely see the bottom. And this shelf over here, we can just see barely the bottom of that. And so that means we are getting close to the horizon. And using all that information, I know the horizon is right between here and here, because we can barely see the top of this, barely see the bottom of that. So I am going to guess it's right about here. Maybe right there. I want it to be a little bit lower than this bookshelf. So I'm going to say right about here is where my horizon is. So there we go. We found it. And we'll be able to confirm that a little later, so remember where my guess is. Furthermore, you can find the horizon by moving things around. These cubes are all below the horizon line right now. We can see the top of all of them. But what happens if I pick them up? Slowly, as it moves upwards, the top of the box will disappear. That means it is now on the horizon. This cube is on the horizon line somewhere. I can only see one side of the cube. You can only see the front face of it right now, right? anywhere in this area where I can only see the front face of the cube is on the horizon. And as I move it upwards, eventually you will see the bottom of the cube. And now I can see two sides again, the front and the bottom. You can even play around. Try to find the exact point where the bottom of the cube disappears. And that is the point where the horizon line is, because it's vanished. Now, what if I moved the cubes to the left or right? Remember when I talked about line of sight? That is where you are looking. Remember that? And the center of the line of sight is essentially the point directly in front of you. This point in the center here is what we call our line of sight. So anything off to the left is to the left of line of sight, and anything off to the right is to the right of the line of sight. And notice the cube to the left of the line of sight. We can actually see the side of the cube. So we can see three sides of the cube right now. And it's important to note that you can never see more than three sides of the cube at once. It is physically impossible. You will only ever see three sides at most. Now the cube in the center here, this is right in front of our line of sight, right here in the center. So we can only see two sides of that cube. And then our cube all the way over here to the right, it's to the right of our line of sight, so we can see this side of the cube now too. So we can see three sides of this cube. So it's an important thing when you're drawing objects to know if you are drawing them on the horizon, above the horizon, or below the horizon. And you have to think if they are on the line of sight, to the left of line of sight, or to the right of the line of sight. Basically, the further you get out from the center, the more you will see of them. Okay, moving on to one-point perspective. First, you may ask, what is one-point perspective? It's when our object has only one set of receiving lines. And for that to happen, our situation needs to be set up in a very specific way. First, our line of sight needs to be looking straight ahead. We are not looking up, we are not looking down in any way. Our eyeballs, or the camera in this case, are looking straight forward at the horizon. All of our vertical lines are perfectly vertical. And we can measure that. So if you take your pencil, or your paintbrush in my case, and hold it straight in front of you, we can use this as a measuring device. Make sure it's perfectly straight up and down. It's not, tilted forward or tilted back. It's not foreshortened in any way. We want it at its full length. And if you hold it perfectly vertical, you can use it to check the room around you to see if all your verticals are vertical. And see the sides of the cube? See my blue lines for my height? If I hold my brush out straight, all of these line up perfectly. They are all perfectly vertical. Even everything else in the room. The corner of that wall there, this picture, the bookcase, the cabinet, the other side of the cabinet, all the way over here. Every vertical in this entire picture is perfectly vertical. So that's how we know we are looking straight ahead. If I was to tilt my camera downwards, none of these lines would be vertical anymore. They would all be tilted and receding. But that's not what we want right now. Secondly, what makes this one-point perspective is how the object is oriented to us. For this to be one-point perspective, the front face of the cube needs to be facing us, this face of our cube, so that it is parallel to our face. And what we can see is a perfect square. There is no distortion happening here. We have a nice perfect square in front of us. Or if you're looking at the room around me, I am looking straight ahead at this wall, or this cabinet rather. And the bookcase, I'm looking straight ahead at this bookcase. You can kind of think of it as a Wes Anderson movie. He loves these type of straight on views. Pretty much like most of a Wes Anderson movie is in one-point perspective. Why this makes it one-point perspective is because since these objects are straight at us, it makes all of the horizontal lines in the room perfectly horizontal. And we can measure that with my pencil or paintbrush. Look at the width of the cubes. These green lines, all of these are perfectly horizontal. The bookshelves are all perfectly horizontal. Everything in this room is horizontal. So we know that the height of the cubes are vertical and not receding. The width of the cubes are horizontal and not receding. But what about the length of the cubes? The length of the cubes are receding away from us, and you can tell that because the edges are now at an angle. If I was to measure with my brush or my pencil, I'm going to hold it up, and you can now see, it's not vertical, it's not horizontal, it is tilted. And it's important, remember, that you're only turning your brush left and right here. You're not, tilting it forward or back. You just want to think of it like a clock. You're just rotating your pencil here. So if I follow this, the length of my cube, which is receding backwards now, I can see this is the angle it is receding at. If I was to draw this line right here, if I was to draw it out on a piece of paper, I would draw it at this angle. And you can see it even matches up perfectly with this line here. They are perfectly in line with each other. And I can measure any other lines here. That line on that side of the cube right here. This line on this side of the cube is getting really tilted. I can look at the bottom of the cubes. They are at that angle. This is my way, by using my brush like this, I'm essentially flattening out the room in front of me. And what you would do when you're doing this at home is make sure you close one eye. So you're just looking at it with one eye, because that will get rid of your binocular vision. You don't want to have two eyes open, because then you're just going to be seeing around it. You want to close one eye and hold out your pencil straight when you do this. And then you can notice that this is also affecting the rest of the room too. What makes this tough with 1-point perspective is there's really not a whole lot of receding lines here. There's not a lot to see. I do have this picture on the wall. It is receding. I can follow that angle. The bottom of it is receding. I can follow that. I can see some of the books on the bookshelf are receding. That falls away. Even a little bit of the sides of the books of these I can follow. Find that angle. But even better is my table here. I very purposely used my cutting board here so you can see that all of these lines are parallel because it's a cutting board, but you can see exactly how they are receding backwards. You can follow that angle as they all point this way. And notice, you can see that they are all basically pointing towards one point. And that will be our vanishing point. And remember, you're thinking of lines that are parallel to one another. So I'm making sure I know that my cubes are parallel to these lines. I know this picture on the wall, these lines on the side of it are parallel to the length of my cube. These books, I know that they are facing me straight on, so they're parallel as well. So you do have to make sure that the lines you are measuring are always parallel. You don't want to measure lines that are at a different angle, because that will really throw you off. And so we know that because all of these lines are parallel, if we were to extend them far enough, they would converge at our vanishing point. And remember, our vanishing point is going to be on the horizon, right? And this is exactly where I predicted my horizon line would be. And that's it. We have deduced this room is in 1-point perspective because our line of sight is eye level, because our vertical lines are all vertical. Since these cubes are facing us, the horizontal lines are horizontal. And that leaves only one set of receding lines in this entire room. And as a little preview for what's to come, how do we make this 2-point perspective? All we have to do is rotate this cube slightly. Now the lines along the width of the cube are no longer horizontal. They are at an angle. So they are now receding as well. So now this cube has the pink lines that are receding that way, the green lines that are receding that way. So this cube is in 2-point perspective. Now, That doesn't change the world around us. This is still 1 point, this is still 1 point, but this cube is 2-point perspective. And let us move that back because we're not there yet. For now, we are just thinking of 1-point perspective. And remember, in 1-point perspective, the cube has to be facing us, so it's not at an angle at all. And we are looking straight ahead at that horizon. And that is 1-point perspective.